Okay, we're going to start the second chelik of the Kovetz. This chelik speaks about Emunah. And the first chelik of the Kovetz speaks about, we spoke about Bitachon, the definition of Bitachon, and how Bitachon plays out in a person's Avodah. Today we're going to do the second chelik of the Kovetz speaks on Emunah, which is connected to Bitachon. That's why we put it in the same Kovetz, which is two chalakim that speak about the definition of Emunah in the Eibishter. What does it mean to believe in the Eibishter? And chelik base that speaks about the difference between the Emunah of a Yid and in the Eibishter and the Emunah of Goyim in the Eibishter. What the difference is practically and where it comes from, in where the makar of a Yid's Emunah and the makar of a Goy's Emunah. So the first sikha is the famous Hadran Tashim and Vav, and in this sikha the Rebbe basically defined what the chiyuv of believing in the Eibishter is. What does it mean that Yid is commanded to believe in the Eibishter? And the Rebbe explains three different levels of Yid's Emunah in the Eibishter, and it defines what the Emunah of Yid in the Eibishter is. So, Be'ikr is from Sif Daled in the Hadran, which is page 77 of the Kovetz. The Hadran isn't only about what Emunah is. That goes into afterwards three different levels of mitzvahs and connected to Mashiach. But before that, the Rebbe starts explaining what exactly is the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem, what is the mitzvah of knowing the Eibishter, and the Rebbe explains also what is the mitzvah of believing in the Eibishter. So we all know that the Rambam starts off in the beginning of Sefer Yad, the first halacha, which explains the first mitzvah of believing in the Eibishter, Yedias Hashem. The Rambam starts off, he says this, Hamud HaChachmis, Leidash Yesho Matzarishe. The Rambam starts off that there's a mitzvah to know that there's the Eibishter, and he's the first being. He's a Matzarishin, he's the first being, and the Rambam continues different details, etc. Which means that by Pashas, the Rambam learns that there's a mitzvah to know that there's a Eibishter, there's a mitzvah to know Leida, Lahamin, other Nuschais have, when it comes to when the Rambam counts the mitzvahs, if a mitzvah is Lahamin, but there's a mitzvah to know that there's a Eibishter. Which means that one of the 613 commandments that the Eibishter gave Yidden is that that a Yid has to know that there's an Eibishter. And the Rishonim had an issue with that. Some Rishonim had the issue with that mitzvah, the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem, which mainly, like it was in Achsidus Barbanal. The Barbanal lived quite a few generations after the Rambam, and he wrote a lot of Svarim, Sayin Chumash, but also he's a big chayker, and he wrote in his Sefer Reish Hamana, he basically brings down different shaylas on the Rambam, shaylas in Halacha. But one of his shaylas is he brings from Rav Chizdoi a shayla on the Rambam. How can the Rambam count the mitzvah of Emunah Hashem and the mitzvah to believe in the Eibishter as a mitzvah? What does it mean that we're commanded to believe in a higher being? What does it mean we're commanded to believe in a Matzarishin, in something which in the first being? If a person is doing the mitzvah, it means he already believes that the Eibishter is there. And if a person doesn't believe in the Eibishter, then who's commanding him to believe in the Eibishter? What does it mean that a person is going to do something based on a command? Every mitzvah means that there's a mitzvah and mitzvah, which means that there's someone who's commanding you to do something, which means that there's already an agreement that this being exists. There's an agreement, there's an acknowledgement that there's a mitzvah, there's a commander, and that commander is going to command to the person who's going to listen to the command, and he's going to do what he has to say. So every command, every time that someone asks someone to do something, any tzivui has to have by definition a mitzvah and a mitzvah. So if a person is doing the tzivui, it means that he already acknowledges the being of the mitzvah. He already acknowledges the being of the commander. Because if not, then what is the significance of that command if he doesn't acknowledge the existence of the commander? So the concept of the Eibishter giving a tzivui to believe in the Eibishter is kind of a contradiction. That's what the Rabbanal brings from this Rav Chizdoi, different questions on the Rambam. So there's different ways of answering this question, different ways of explaining what exactly is the mitzvah of Emunah. But if you learn it at face value, then the mitzvah of Emunah is a stira to, the concept of Emunah is a stira to a tzivui, to a commandment of someone telling you to believe in something, telling you to believe in him. So the Barbanal answers, and it fits into the Lashon Rambam, that the commandment, the tzivui of Emunah, isn't to believe in the existence of the Eibishter. That is something that a person has to come to his own maskane before he has a tzivui, before he has a commandment to believe in the Eibishter, like we said before. So what is the mitzvah to believe in the Eibishter? The mitzvah to believe in the Eibishter is that a person has to believe that the Eibishter is, that he has to believe that the Eibishter is the complete existence that exists. What is the concept of a complete existence? The true definition of existence. The true definition of existence means that he exists 100%. Most things, anything which we see, anything which is a nivra, anything which is a creation, part of being a creation means that there was a creator who created it. It means that there was something that made that existence exist. Whether it's a table, whether it's a chair, whether it's anything, any nivra which is created, it means that it was created, its existence is dependent on being created. Since there was a time that he didn't exist, and now he does exist, means that by Ba'atzem, we don't need that thing to exist. That thing could have not existed, like it didn't exist until now. That object, if a person comes and makes a table, before the table was here, there was nothing here, which means that in order for the world to exist, the table doesn't have to be here. Why is the table here? Because someone created the table for a specific purpose that the table is going to be here. So the existence of the table is dependent on the person who made that table into existence. So the table is always going to have to justify why he's here. And the justification of the table is that someone put him here. And so to every other nivra, every other creation in the world doesn't truly exist on their own merit. Their existence is dependent on someone putting them there. On the lashon of chkire or lashon of chassidus, it's efshari mitzias. Efshari mitzias means that their mitzias, their existence is efshari, is possible. It doesn't have to be that way. It's existing because someone made it that way. That person made it for a specific purpose. The second that person will decide that that purpose doesn't exist anymore, so then the creation doesn't need to be there anymore. The same thing with the Eibusher creating the world. The world's mitzias is efshari mitzias. The world's mitzias doesn't exist by their own right. It exists by the Eibusher creating it. V'harai, it wasn't there. The world is chas v'shalom not a kadmin. It's also something that the chkira goes through, whether the world is a kadmin or not. That the world, by definition, was created, and since the world was created, means that the world doesn't have to exist in its own right. It doesn't have any right to existence in its own right. It's here because someone made it into existence. As opposed to the Eibusher wasn't created by anyone. That if you believe in the Eibusher means that you believe that he wasn't created by anyone. Because the second you say that he was created by anyone, he's a nivra. He's a creation. He's not the motzei. He's not the first existence. In order to be the first existence means that he wasn't created by anyone. And if the Eibusher wasn't created by anyone, chas v'shalom, so therefore it means his existence is truly justified on his own right. His existence exists because he needs to exist. Because he made himself exist, not because someone else is making him to exist. He made himself exist, which in other words means that he always existed. If something always exists, so by definition, he exists in a true, in a shleimus way. That is what the Rabbanah says. The person has a tzivui to believe in the existence of the Eibusher, which doesn't mean the existence of whether the Eibusher is here or not. Chas v'shalom, it means that after you know with your own knowledge, we'll see where that comes from. After you know with your own knowledge that there is a matzah edition, there is a first being. So the tzivui is that now the Eibusher comes as one of the tayag mitzvahs. One of the 613 commandments the Eibusher gave Yidden is that a Yid has to believe that this matzah edition that he knows is the true definition of existence. It's an existence that doesn't depend on anyone else. And not only that it doesn't depend on anyone else, anything else that exists depends on him. So according to Abarbanal, the mitzvah of Emunah isn't to believe in the existence of the Eibusher, it's to believe how the Eibusher exists. And that's, and the Rebbe sticks it into the lashon of the Rambam. The Rambam says himself that the mitzvah is, you say this, it's true, the Rambam starts off by saying that the mitzvah of Emunah is to believe in the existence of the Eibusher, but then the Rambam adds a whole bunch of different pratim, part of that mitzvah. Part of that mitzvah is also to believe anything else that exists in the world comes from the Eibusher. And the Rambam adds, that anything that exists, his existence is dependent on the Eibusher. If the Rambam held that the mitzvah of believing in the Eibusher is only a simple commandment to believe in the existence of the Eibusher, he should have just wrote that the first mitzvah is, you say the Yesodus Emunah Chacham. That's it. Why is the Rambam not describing different things that the Eibusher does? These things that the Eibusher does of creating the world and describing of the existence of Nivraim isn't just to tell us information of what the Eibusher did, of how other existence came into existence. The Rambam is telling us what is the definition, what is the gather of the mitzvah of Emunah Hashem. The gather of the mitzvah of Emunah Hashem is to believe in the shleimus hametzias of the Eibusher. That is what the Abarbanal teaches in the mitzvah of Emunah Hashem. So that's all one level of a Yid's Emunah and the Eibusher. Now, the Tzemach Tzedek explains in the mitzvah of Emunah Salakus, and Derech Mitzisecha, Tzemach Tzedek brings down the Abarbanal, and the Tzemach Tzedek says that he called the Abarbanal Achachum Agadol Hashalom B'Deisa, which is a title that Tzemach Tzedek says in a lot of people. But the Tzemach Tzedek says that the Abarbanal said that the mitzvah of Emunah is to believe that the Eibusher is Mechuyev Metzias. L'chayra, that's also not a level of Emunah. A person doesn't have to come to the concept of belief that the Eibusher is Mechuyev Metzias, because according to what he explained in Kabbalah, and the Chassidus explains what the Eibusher is, that in order to create the Metzius of the world, that the Eibishter has to be a Mechuyev Metzius, this concept that the Eibishter is a Mechuyev Metzius, that the Eibishter is the true existence, the only legitimate existence, which doesn't have to come onto anything else, is something which is part of knowledge in the Eibishter. If a person knows that the Eibishter is the first being, which according to the Rabbanel, that has to be already before the mitzvah of Emunah, according to the Rabbanel, that has to be already a Yesod before you come out to the mitzvah of Emunah. So according to the Tzemach Tzedek, that also, if you already have that Yesod, that the Eibishter is the Matzi Rishon, that the Eibishter is the first being of existence, then included in that is that the Eibishter is a Mechuyev Metzius. Included in saying the word Eibishter means that the Eibishter is a Mechuyev Metzius. Because according to what the Kabbalah explains, what the concept of a beirei, what a creation, what someone who creates something is, that if you're creating something yesh miyayin, if you're creating something the way the Eibishter created Nivra, means that the Eibishter has to be Mechuyev Metzius. Means that the Eibishter has to be the only true legitimate existence. So you don't have to come onto Emunah to explain it. And therefore the Tzemach Tzedek comes into a different explanation of what the mitzvah of Emunah is. The mitzvah of Emunah is to believe that the Eibishter is higher than l'mayla madregas hachachma, higher than the madreg of chachma. What does that mean, higher than the madreg of chachma? What it means is Emunah, when a yid is mechuyev to believe that the Eibishter is higher than any tzir of seder shtalshlos. Now that which the Eibishter is higher than any tzir of seder shtalshlos, that yid has to come into Emunah, because things which are higher than his shtalshlos are completely higher than his seichel. It's a level that a person cannot reach, cannot interact with the seichel. So therefore, since it's higher than seichel, then a person has to have emunah for those in yon. So in other words, according to the Rabbanel, the basic level of emunah is to believe the Eibishter is Mechuyev Metzius. Comes the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Tzemach Tzedek adds a nupshat in emunah, that a yid has to believe that the Eibishter is higher than the Metzius of Chachma, higher than any tzir or any sphira that a yid's seichel could grasp. So that's the concept of emunah. So what comes out from here, there's two pirushim what emunah is. It's the Rabbanel's pirush and the Tzemach Tzedek's pirush. Both pirushim are both explaining two different inyanim alakus. The Rabbanel is explaining the shleimus of alakus, the way alakus expresses itself in Mechuyev Metzius, and the Tzemach Tzedek is explaining a higher type of shleimus. And not only is the Eibishter mushim, not only is the Eibishter the true existence, the way seichel defines the true existence, and the way seichel, intellect, will define the true existence as something which has a completely legitimate existence. But the Eibishter is even higher than that definition. The Eibishter is higher than being a true existence, the way seichel is machriach, a true existence. The Eibishter is higher than the gdarim of seichel. The Eibishter is higher than the definitions of seichel. I'm going to explain soon exactly what that means. So what comes out from here, there's three dargas, there's three levels of emunah. You have the first and most basic level of emunah is that a yid believes in the Eibishter, without explaining what the Eibishter is, without any definitions of what the Eibishter is. The yid has a general knowledge in a matzah. The yid has general knowledge in something that exists, which is a higher being. That is the first level of emunah, and that comes even before a yid has the mitzvah of emunah. This is a concept that a yid believes in the Eibishter before he's commanded to believe in the Eibishter. It's a very, very general knowledge in having a knowing about a matzah. Then you have the pirush of the Rabbanel, which is the second level. That after a person knows the existence, he believes in the existence of the Eibishter, he has another tzivur to believe that this existence that he knows, this existence that he already knows, is the true definition of existence, which that is the concept of Mechuyev Metzius. That's the Rabbanel. Then comes the third pirush, which is the Tzemach Tzedek's pirush, that not only is a yid mechuyev to believe the Eibishter is Mechuyev Metzius, but that's also mitzad, that's also common sense. That's part of the gedder of general belief in the Eibishter. Comes a new tzivui. The tzivui is that he has to believe that the Eibishter is higher than Chachma. The Eibishter is higher than the definitions of seichel to begin with, or higher than his seichel tells him is the true definition of existence. That's all mitzat seichel. Then comes a new tzivui of emunah. Emunah means belief, to believe that the Eibishter is higher than all the definitions of seichel to begin with. So that what you believe that the Eibishter is Mechuyev Metzius, that's what his seichel tells him that the Eibishter is Mechuyev Metzius. That's part of the gdarim of seichel. That's part of the true shleimus of his seichel, the true shleimus of a true existence is that he doesn't need to come onto anything else. That is seichel's machriach. Comes emunah means emunah has to believe that the Eibishter is a ganzen higher than seichel. The Eibishter has no connection to anything that is seichel's mechayiv. Which in other words, in the Lashon Chassidus, it's called Yidiyas HaShlila. That a person knows that whatever he knows about the Eibishter, the true definition of Mechuyev Metzius, that he came to Maskana Api Seichel, he has a tzivur of emunah to believe that the Eibishter is completely higher than anything that he knows. Or in the Lashon of the Tzemach Tzedek, that the Eibishter is higher than Chachma. Which Chachma is the first level of Seder Shtalshus. Chachma is the first level that the Eibishter starts relating to Nivraim. A Yid has a tzivur to believe, not to know, to believe that the Eibishter is higher than any tzir which relates to Nivraim, the Eibishter is completely blikvo, which is higher than seichel. So these are the three levels of Emunah Yid has. Now, but Pashtos, this is where the Rebbe's Chiddush comes in. If you're only magdir which level of these levels is the highest level, Pashtos, the third level, is the highest level. That which a Yid believes in the Eibishter, completely higher than the level of Chacham, which means that which a Yid associates the Eibishter, which is completely higher than his seichel is machriya, then his seichel dictates them. That's the highest level. But it's the other way around. The first level, the most simple level, that Yid believes with Emunah in the concept, in the mitzvahs of a Matzah Rishon, the Yid believes in Emunah in the concept of a first existence, which that which he believes in the first existence is higher than any tzivui, higher than any commandment that the Eibishter gives him. That is the highest connection Yid can have to the Eibishter mitzvah Emunah. Why is that? It's the lowest one. If Yid can connect to the Eibishter on a higher level, that is, he can already have a definition of what the Eibishter is. Or even higher, that the Eibishter is higher than definition, that's much higher than having only a general knowledge that the Eibishter is the first existence that exists. So the answer is that B'etzem, everything in this world, the way it works is that the Siba is higher than the Musuv. A cause is higher than an effect. In order for something to cause something, that the cause has to have strength in that action to affect the effect that comes out of it. If not, then the cause, the effect will be much stronger than the cause, then the cause won't have the strength to make such an effect. So if you're saying that the cause of a Yid belief in the Eibishter, on all the levels of Holocaust, Saifit, Mitzad Rabbanal, Saifit, Mitzad Tzemach Tzedek, that's coming from the basic understanding, the basic level of connecting to the Eibishter, that there's a Matzah Rishon, there's a first existence. So that first premise has to be in a way stronger than anything that comes out of it. But what's the Avon in them? What's the beer in them? What's the logic in them? So the answer is a Nivra, or a separate entity, any connection he's going to have to the Eibishter, which is based on his Seichel, is going to be limited to a certain extent. Let's start with the Barbanel. That which the Barbanel says that Yid believes in the Eibishter is the Shleimus HaMetzias. Yid believes that the Eibishter is the true entity, the most legitimate entity that can exist. That's all which is Seichel is Mechayvim. Seichel tells you that what is a legitimate existence? The legitimate existence is that it doesn't have to come onto anyone else. Who decides that? Where does that come from? That comes from the laws of Seichel, the laws of logic. The laws of logic tell you that if you depend on someone else means you're not complete, and if you don't depend on someone else means you are complete. Which means that the laws of logic dictate to you what is the definition, or define to you what is the definition of a true existence. The true existence is he doesn't need anything else, and everything else needs him. That's the true existence. But that's all in the definitions of Seichel. That's all the way Seichel defines the true existence. Meaning, if you're going to ask a separate entity to describe the Eibishter, or describe a Matzah Rishon, or describe a first being, he's going to describe to you a complete being, which is the way Seichel defines a complete being, which is a Mechuyev Mitzvah. So that's all based on the Nivr's perspective. Even if you're going to go to the higher level, which is the Tzemach Tzedek, that which the Tzemach Tzedek mentions in Nachem Titzachah, the Eibishter is higher than Chachma. At the end of the day, that's all the way Seichel is dictating that the Eibishter is higher than the Gdom of Seichel. In other words, Seichel telling you that the true Shleimus is not that he's defined up his Seichel, but there's a higher Shleimus which is higher than Seichel, which is what we call Yidis HaShlila. But at the end of the day, that's coming mitzad, the way Seichel is being magdir, a Shleimus and Holocaust, the way Seichel is describing milus or complete existence and Holocaust. But in them, there's two levels. There's the way Seichel defines a Shleimus and Holocaust, that Seichel is able to understand and define that, which is Mechuyev Mitzvahs. And then there's a higher level that Seichel is able to say that the Eibishter is higher than the definitions. But how can you define something which is higher than the definitions? How can you come to Maskana to something which is higher than the definitions? You're going to tell me that Seichel itself is telling you that he's higher than the definitions. So at the end of the day, it has a connection to the world of Seichel and the Gdom of Seichel. You're saying that he's higher than the Gdom of Seichel, but it has a connection to the world of Seichel. The true concept of Etzem, the true concept of the Eibishter, which is higher than any definition whatsoever, that comes from the Eibishter revealing himself to Yidden in his true form without Yidden defining him. It's not undefinable because we are saying he's undefinable. He doesn't have definitions because that's the emes. In other words, a Yid doesn't define that Eibishter is higher than definitions. A Yid knows the Eibishter mitzad the fact. The fact is that the Eibishter is higher than definitions. Now, if it's coming mitzad that's the fact, not because a Nivra is describing something which is higher than definitions, that's the true concept of higher than definitions. And that's why Al brings it today, that which a Yid down here in Elam Hazah, which we were after Tzimtzum, and we don't see the Eibishter's presence begotten, but when it comes to Noshim And Tinoikis, when it comes to children suddenly are able to say Baruch Hashem with the Pshitis. Where's this concept of Baruch Hashem come to the Pshitis? Where's the fact? How's the child know with the fact that the Eibush is existent? That's because Hamoed is godless, because the Eibush is revealed. And since the Eibush is revealed, the Etzem of Likkutei is revealed, that a child is able to describe that when he says Baruch Hashem, a child is able to tap into that because that's a fact. So he's not defining, or a Nivra is not defining a Likkutei or believing in a Likkutei based on any definitions. That's a fact. If that's the fact, you're connecting to Likkutei on Likkutei's terms, not on a Nivra's terms, and not on anything connected to the Gdarim of Seichos terms. If you find a dogma, Chassidus explains the difference between Ri and Shmir. Right? When a person sees something, a person understands something. When a person understands something, whatever level of understanding he's going to have is always going to be connected to whatever's revealed to him. Which means any understanding that he's going to have is going to be the way a separate entity understands that mitzvah. For example, if I'm going to describe to someone a picture, that person's going to imagine the picture according to his understanding what the picture is going to look like. Why? Because I'm describing to him something that he didn't see, something that he's understanding. The definition of understanding means the way his own seichel, him as a separate entity, grasps something. That's the concept of seichel. Even if he's going to understand that this picture is higher than explanation, it's still going to be some sort associated with his own seichel, his own shmir, his seichel decided that. But when a person sees something, it's not his definitions. When a person sees something, he doesn't understand what he sees. He sees the thing itself revealing itself to him. He sees the picture in its entity, and the picture's entity revealing itself to him. He gets lost. He doesn't understand anything. But he saw the answer of the picture. And that's the fact. He can't deny it. Since he saw the mahut of the picture, since the picture revealed itself to him, not because he's understanding what he saw, he's not internalizing what he saw, but that is the fact. So he's able to that fact will never go away from him. It's going to be clear to him, much clearer than any seichel. That's why Ein Nasadain, etc. Because he's connecting to the picture in the picture's terms, in the picture's world, not in his terms. And therefore, the first level of Emunah, that a Yid, the Etzem HaNacha, the first HaNacha that a Yid believes in the Eibishter. Why? Because the Eibishter is Bizgalus, Hamoed Bizgalus. That is the highest level of Emunah. That is the level of Likkutei which is higher than any definitions whatsoever. Where does it express itself? It expresses itself in the Likkutei also. Mitzad dargis of Likkutei which are defined, so they're not able to be completely higher than definitions. For example, the Rishonim had a big machlekes about it, whether the Eibishter is or not. Whether the Eibishter can make two things be happening exactly at the same time, which are completely opposite to each other. For example, whether the Eibishter can make a square triangle at the same time, or the Eibishter can make an elephant go through the hole of a needle. So the Rambam, another Rishonim, the Eibishter doesn't do such things. To say the Eibishter breaks nature, to say the Eibishter goes against nature, that's one of these sayings in Yiddishkeit, in the concept of Vanes, Kriyas Yamsuf is against nature. But to say that there should be two completely opposite things happening in exactly the same time, which are completely contradictory, isn't an Inyan which a Likkutei does. And the reason for that is because the Likkutei doesn't connect to this world of something which doesn't have any connection to Seichel whatsoever. It's true the Eibishter is higher than Seichel. Everyone agrees the Eibishter is Kol Yochel. But Kol Yochel means that he's higher than the Gdarim of Seichel. But to say that there should be the Gdarim of Seichel and the Gdarim of Seichel shouldn't make sense, that a Likkutei doesn't have a connection to. It's not one of the flows of a Likkutei. And like Chassidus explains, one of the reasons why they said that was because then people were saying that the Eibishter the Eibishter can make Chas Hashem two Eibishters, and the Eibishter could become a guf. If the Eibishter could do anything, if the Eibishter could be nice, and the Eibishter could do anything, so why is the Eibishter not a guf? Why is the Eibishter not? Nothing is taken away from the Eibishter. So there has to be some sort of things that makes in some sort of gather of what a Likkutei is. Comes the Rashba, the famous Shubha writes that the Eibishter does something. Two things can exist at the same time. Like we say, Makamar and Emunah Mida. That place and something which is higher than place coexist at the same time. And Itaka doesn't make sense. And it's not defined. Because the true definition of Likkutei is not only that he's higher than definitions, but that which is higher than definitions is completely undefined in any way. You can't even define him by being higher than definitions. If so, then why is the Eibishter on the Guf Chas Hashem? Why is there no two Eibishters? Because the Eibishter told us in Torah what the definitions are. The Eibishter said Nech Hashem Lekach, and the Eibishter said Le'ilcha. So we know mitzad the Likkutei Gufe that such thing doesn't exist. But can it be mitzad the Eibishter's higher than Gdarim? Everything could be. So that's the concept of the true definition of Likkutei is that he's not defined. And where does Yid connect to that? A Yid connects to that in the first level of when Yid, the etzem anocha, that a Yid agrees that there's a matzah edition without having a mitzivui and without having any haflies in them. That's that first connection with Eibishter. And in the level of Chassidus is mamala sevim natzmus. Mamala kolam is the way the Eibishter is a shleimus in definitions. Seva kolam means the way the Eibishter is higher than definitions, and natzmus means the way the Eibishter is higher than being higher than definitions. The whole concept of definitions doesn't relate to him in any way. If you can say a mashal, a pashto mashal, that when you have someone sees a chacham, someone connects to a smart person, a gaon. So there's three ways you can connect to him. The first way is he hears a shiur from him. If he hears a shiur from the chacham, so he comes to maskana that the chacham is a very smart guy. He heard a shiur from him. How can you say no? But that which he's saying the chacham is a smart guy is based on what he heard. Based on what he heard, the chacham is a smart guy. So the thing that he heard, that makes the chacham into his seichel, understands how the chacham is a smart guy. Then you have a higher level. Someone comes and tells this person, by the way, whatever you heard is nothing. Do you know when the chacham, when he learns himself, is much higher than what you heard? So then his seichel is masking in echanami. The chacham is much higher than what I heard. Not because he understands the greatness of the chacham. Now there's a whole new dead hair in the flow of the chacham. Not because he understands it, but he understands that he doesn't understand. But this is all, these two levels is connected to the chacham seichel. The shleimus in seichel. The way the son of the chacham relates to the chacham, it has nothing to do with seichel. It has to do with when the son of the chacham says tatum and he calls to his father, he connects to his father k'meshu, higher than seichel, higher than any definitions. And that's the first diagram of Emunah. The first diagram of Emunah is before a commandment, before a tzivui, to believe in the Eibishter. The first diagram of Emunah is a Yid connecting to Atzmos, because Atzmos is Begilui Hamori B'Izgalus, and therefore he's able to connect to Atzmos on Atzmos' terms, on Elukus' terms, not on his terms. This is all mitzad a Yid connecting to Elukus. Mitzad Elukus is Begilui Hamori B'Izgalus. The next Sichos explain, connected to what to the first Sichos we just explained now. The next Sichos explain the Maila of the Emunah of a Yid. The Pashas way we explain the Torah is that since Elukus is Begilui, so therefore a Yid is able to connect to Elukus in a certain way of Emunah. It means Emunah is belief. Emunah means that a person believes in something. A person has seichel, and seichel is able to understand something. It's the definitions of seichel. Comes Emunah. Emunah means there's something higher than seichel, and something higher than seichel is able to connect to something which is higher than the definitions of seichel. So Emunah is a koich in the person. The next Sichos are going to explain that even though Emunah is a koich in the person, there's a big difference between the Emunah of a Yid and the Emunah of a Goy. Because the Pashtos, if you say Emunah is a koich of a person, so a Goy could also have Emunah. A Goy could also have the concept of belief. A Goy has seichel, a koich is premium, and a Goy also has koich and makifim. So a Goy could also have the concept of Emunah. What's the difference between a Yid's Emunah and a Goy's Emunah? Why do we have to say there's a difference? So it says in Medrash that B'schus Emunah nigelu Yisrael Mitzrayim. That the Yidden were released from Mitzrayim, the Yidden had the goal from Mitzrayim in the schus of their Emunah. Which means that there's something that the Yidden had Emunah different than anything else. What's the difference between the Yid's Emunah and the Guy's Emunah? Especially Chassidus Mesayla, that they're made in mitzvahs of the Eibishter. Either a Goy does have a mitzvahs, for example. What's the difference? Is the Goy's Emunah the difference than the Yid's Emunah? So the answer is, it's also connected to what we said before, that by a Goy, any connection he has to Lakus starts from his seichel. A Goy, the Metzias of Welt, the only thing he knows is the Metzias of Elam Hazar. The Metzias of Elam is B'Pshitis. That's one of the points of Tzimtzum is. One of the points of Tzimtzum is that Elam is B'Pshitis and Lakus B'Schachos. So a Goy, this is not Metzias. And Elam Nasham Elam has, which means in this world we don't see the Metzias of the Eibishter. So what is B'Pshitis? What is something which relates to a Goy? Is Elamis, is Vel. Elamai. Since there's a klal sichli, the ein davar esai satzmi. There's a klal sichli, seichel itself says that the world can't make by itself. And therefore, yesh balabayis libirazu. There has to be a creator of the world. So therefore, a goy kavyoch, his seichel forces him, or his seichel dictates to him, that even though he sees b'pshitas the mitzvahs of the world, but there has to be something deeper that created the world. And therefore, a goy agrees to the concept of the Eibishter. A guy agrees to the concept of Likus. Why? Not because it's something that he relates to, but because it's something that his seichel forced him to say that there's something higher that he doesn't see. And that's the Emunah of a Goy. The Emunah of a Goy is something that has to come from Seichel relating to that there's something higher than what he sees. As opposed to by Yidden, it's the other way around. Yidden is a chelik elokam imal mamish. And mitzad that Yidden is a chelik elokam imal mamish, a Yid be'etzem believes in the Eibishter. He doesn't need Seichel to force him to have Emunah. He has Emunah mitzad tivim, mitzad his nature. The nature of a Yid is not Welt, the pshitas of a Yid is not Welt, the pshitas of a Yid is a Elokus. He has a chelik elokam imal mamish. And therefore his Emunah isn't based on how much Seichel is machriach him to believe in the Eibishter. His Emunah is based on that he's be'etzem Elokus. And since he's be'etzem Elokus, that's his nature. That's who he is. Not that the Metzius of Welt is mitzchadjus. The Metzius of Welt doesn't make sense. So it's completely opposite. What a guy does. By a guy, the Metzius of Elokus is mitzchadjus. The Metzius of Elokus is something that is against his nature. It's something which has to be proven to him. But by Yid, the Metzius of Welt is the Metzius has to be proven to him. So by Yid, his Emunah isn't a koyach that a Yid has, that just like a Yid has Seichel, Yid is a Midas, a Yid also has a koyach of Emunah to believe in commonly things. No, a Yid's Emunah comes from who he is. A Yid's Emunah comes from connecting to his nature, as opposed to by a Goy, it's the other way around. A Yid's Emunah is going against his nature. A Goy's Emunah is going against his nature. That plays itself out also in practical terms, that when a Yid and a Goy see a miracle, they both react in different ways. When a Goy sees a miracle, he's forced to agree that it's a miracle. Why? Because if a Goy sees something which is higher than nature, Seichel itself says that this is against nature. And therefore you have to agree that it's a miracle. But that's all what Seichel agreed that it's higher than a miracle. Anything over that limit, or anything that it can explain up his Seichel, she's going to explain up his Seichel. Mashenkin by Yid is the other way around. Mashenkin Yid, even in nature, even in something which makes 100% sense, what does a Yid see in that nature? He doesn't see the thing that makes sense. A Yid connects to the part of Teva which is higher than Teva. A Yid connects to the Lakusha b'Teva, or the Dvar Hashem, the Machai, that's Machai the Welt. Why? Because my Yid, his Teva is a Lakus. And since by Yid his Teva is a Lakus, so when he connects to, when he sees something that's Teva, he doesn't see the Teva Shabbai, he sees the Lakusha Shabbai, because that's what his nature is. So by a Goy, his Emunah is coming from something which is outside of him. By Yid, his Emunah is coming from who he is, from who his Teva is. It doesn't have it's not a stira to that which you say Emunah is a Keach Makif. Because at the end of the day, even if it's Teva, it's his nature, and even if it's bad to who he is, at the end of the day, it doesn't have a connection to his Keach Pnimi. It doesn't have a connection to his Seichel and his Midas. His Seichel and his Midas are part of himself that feels a yesh. Don't connect to this Teva. And therefore, it's that very day to bring the Makim into the Pnimi. Now, this difference also has to do with the Chiyuv of the Chiyuv of Yidden believing in the Eibishter and the Chiyuv of a Goy believing in the Eibishter. A Goy is a Mitzvah on Shituf. A Goy could believe that the Eibishter is the Goy could believe that the Eibishter has partners. As opposed to a Yid has to believe in Achas Hashem, that there's only one Eibishter and that's it. The Chayra, if there's a problem with Shituf, why a Goy Mitzvah that they shouldn't believe in Shituf? Believing in the Eibishter is one of Shav Mitzvah in there. They also have to believe in the Eibishter. So when it comes to believing in the Eibishter, there's a difference in a Yid believing in the Eibishter and the Goy believing in the Eibishter. What's the difference in the Chiyuv? So the answer is, based on what we said before, and this is the third Sikha. By a Yid, his Emunah doesn't start from his Metzias. His Emunah doesn't start from his Seichel. By a Yid, his Emunah starts from his Chelik Halakayim Mamish, which means that Likkutei is being made in him. That's why Emunah is also Miloshin Uman. Usually we touch Emunah means Seichel, but it's a Masalik touches in Echmet Seichel. Emunah is Miloshin Uman, a professional, or his nature. Because by a Yid, the Emunah is the Eitzah of the Eibishter being his Teva, the Eibishter being made in him. So what's the focus? The focus isn't on his Metzias, the focus is on the Chelik Halakayim Mamish, which is Havaya made Benafshe, which is on the Eibishter being made in him. As opposed to by a Goy, his Emunah doesn't start from the Eibishter, his Emunah starts from him. Since his Emunah starts from him, which means all things based on his Metzias, so his Emunah isn't able to be, he's never able to grasp an Inyan that's completely Shalul's Metzias. He's never able to believe in something that's completely says that nothing else exists besides the Eibishter. Because his Emunah is based on him understanding as the Eibishter. His Emunah is based on the kinds of Metzias. Therefore, Goyim are Mitzvah on Shituf. Adarach difference between Riyah and Shmiya. When a person, like I said before, a person sees something and a person hears something. Yidden, their connection to Likus is an Eifin of the ear. An Eifin of the see in Likus. What's when a person sees something? When a person sees something, he's not able to deny it. When a person sees something, it penetrates him and it affects him in such a way that it takes over his seichel. A person can't say, I didn't see something because I didn't understand something. Because when a person sees something, it affects him in a way that becomes part of him. Why? Because when a person sees something, he's seeing the Musa Davar, that the thing revealed itself to him. The Davar Anira, the picture, whatever it is, he saw the Musa of that picture. He saw the essence of that picture. Since he saw the essence of that picture, that essence was able to take him over completely. He came into the world of the picture. He joined the world of the picture on the picture's terms. He doesn't have to understand it because he came into the world of the picture. But it's starting because the picture exists and he's coming to that world. As opposed to when it comes to Shmiya, when a person understands something, the definition of understanding means that you're a separate mitzvah. The definition of understanding, to begin with, the concept of Shmiya and Avana means that we're taking the concept and we're diluting it to someone else, to Zula, to someone else, to a separate mitzvah. If I'm going to have to take a picture and explain it to someone how the picture looks like, what am I explaining to him? I'm explaining to him all the details of the picture, not the picture the way the picture is, but the way the picture is able to be translated into a separate mitzvah that's not coming to the world of the picture. And that's the same thing to the Emunah V'Yid and Emunah V'Goy. The Emunah V'Yid is in Hashem Echad. Emunah V'Yid means that he is able to have a Re'in in a Likkutei. A Yid is able to connect to a Likkutei on a Likkutei's terms. And therefore, he's Mitzvah and Shituf. Because once you connect the Likkutei on Likkutei's terms, how can you start believing something else, a Shituf, anything besides the Eibishter? As opposed to a Goy, Mosheik a Goy, his Emunah is on Mitzvah Shmiyah, which means that L'chatchila gives a Nesinis Makam, that it should be a separate entity. L'chatchila gives a Nesinis Makam, that it should be a separate Metzias, that Metzias is Kaviocha, a spectator, or connecting to the Likkutei on his terms. And that's why a Goy is Mitzvah and Shituf. It's not Mitzvah and Shituf. So that's three sikhs that go through the concept of Emunah. How the Emunah of a Goy is different than the Emunah of a Yid. That the Emunah of a Goy comes from his own Seichel, and therefore is always going to be limited to the Kondik of Seichel, as opposed to a Yid, his Emunah comes from his Chelik al-Kamim, and therefore it's on Likkutei's terms and not on his terms. You know, it says in Chassidus, it says in Chassidus, we learned before, that a Goy is the Emunah of a Goy is only normal kalam, it's not a seven kalam. A Goy is not able to believe in something which is completely higher than his mitzvahs. So the Shaila is what's pshat? How can a Goy not believe? How can we see Goyim could have faith, it could have Emunah in something which is completely higher than mitzvahs? How can it be that a Goy can't reach the level of Emunah of a Yid? Now it's very pashut, based on what I said before. A Goy, anything that he's going to connect to the Likkutei is always going to be based on his terms, because his whole connection to something which is higher than Seichel starts from Seichel. A person understands, he sees with his own eyes as the world, as a table. In order to see the table, he has to make a klal sichli that ain't davar eis atzmis. Therefore, someone created the table, and then someone created the person who created the table, and therefore someone created the world. V'cholo. And whenever dargis is going to connect, since it started from his mitzvahs, it's always going to have some sort of agbala in the Emunah he has. It's defined by being in the Gdorim of Seichel. Doesn't mean that it can't be higher than Seichel, but it's all in the definitions of Seichel. It starts with definitions of Seichel. But Shenkin by Yid, since the Emunah starts from Hashem Echad, it starts from the Eibishter. Ata Yiresu Ladas Hashem Ulekim. Since it starts by the Eibishter, so therefore it's on the Likkutei's terms. And he is able to have a Emunah mitzvah chelik al-Kamim al-Mamish, his neshama, and therefore the Emunah is bulti mugbal in the Likkutei, which is bulti mugbal. And that's a specialty of a Yid's Emunah. So that's the end of this sugya. Next sugya, Mr. Hashem, we're going to do the sugya of Mesiras Nefesh. We're going to go through different sikhs that explain the shayrish of Mesiras Nefesh, from what is the Aved of Mesiras Nefesh in the Rebbe's Torah in Likkutei Sichos.